Have you ever witnessed a rescue so impossible it challenged everything you believed about the natural world? Where ancient enemies became unlikely heroes in moments of desperate need? Deep in Kenya's wilderness, a mother lion's desperate roar for help would summon a savior so unexpected, so completely contrary to millions of years of evolutionary programming that it would leave wildlife experts speechless and prove that sometimes the most impossible alliances emerge when survival demands miracles that defy all understanding.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
Deep within Kenya's Maasai Mara National Reserve, where endless golden grasslands stretch toward distant acacia-dotted horizons, lies one of East Africa's most magnificent wilderness sanctuaries. This UNESCO-protected ecosystem encompasses thousands of square kilometers of pristine savannah, where solitary fever trees rise like ancient sentinels above a landscape that pulses with the eternal rhythm of predator and prey. The grasslands themselves seem alive, carpeted in emerald during rainy seasons and golden amber during dry months, creating a constantly shifting canvas that has remained unchanged since the dawn of time. Seasonal rivers wind through valleys carved by countless migrations, their banks lined with doom palms and fig trees that provide crucial shade for the greatest wildlife spectacle on Earth. The air itself vibrates with life, thick with the earthy scent of sun-baked soil and the distant calls of countless species that have called this place home for millennia. But the Mara also harbors secrets that challenge our understanding of the rigid hierarchies that govern wilderness survival. This is a place where the impossible becomes reality, where ancient evolutionary barriers dissolve in moments of extraordinary crisis. In these mystical grasslands, where the circle of life plays out in its most dramatic forms, the most unlikely alliances can emerge when desperation demands solutions that transcend every natural law. What was about to unfold in this pristine wilderness would prove that sometimes the most profound acts of rescue come from the most unexpected sources, demonstrating that when maternal love collides with mortal danger, heroes can emerge from places that defy every assumption about natural enemies and evolutionary programming. This was a story that would challenge fundamental beliefs about animal relationships and reveal that beneath the surface of species rivalry lies something far more complex and beautiful than science had ever imagined. The extraordinary events that were about to transform both predator and unlikely savior would prove that in nature's most desperate moments, when conventional help seems impossible, miracles can arrive from sources so unbelievable that they rewrite our understanding of compassion, courage, and the mysterious bonds that connect all living creatures in ways that continue to astound and humble human observers.
Roaming the vast expanses of the Maasai Mara lived Asha, a 6-year-old lioness whose name meant life in Swahili, a fitting tribute to her role as mother to 3 precious cubs who represented her entire world. Standing nearly 3.5 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 300 pounds, Asha's golden coat bore the subtle scars of countless hunts and territorial battles that had shaped her into one of the Mara's most capable and devoted mothers. Asha's cubs, 2 playful males named Jengo and Bomani, and 1 fearless female called Zuri, had just reached the adventurous age of 4 months, when their natural curiosity often led them into dangerous situations that required constant maternal vigilance. Their boundless energy and fearless exploration of their grassland territory had made them both the joy and constant worry of their protective mother, whose every waking moment was dedicated to ensuring their survival in one of Africa's most challenging environments. What made Asha extraordinary wasn't just her hunting prowess or territorial success, but her remarkable intelligence and problem-solving abilities that had earned her recognition among local Maasai guides as one of the most adaptable lionesses they had ever observed. Her capacity for strategic thinking and environmental assessment had allowed her to successfully raise cubs in territory that overlapped with some of the Mara's most dangerous predators. Just 5 kilometers from Asha's territory lived Janani, a massive bull elephant whose name meant brave one in Ma, a reflection of his role as protector of a small family herd that had learned to navigate the complex territorial boundaries that crisscrossed the reserve. Standing nearly 11 feet tall and weighing over 6 tons, Janani's imposing frame was balanced by remarkably gentle eyes that reflected the wisdom and emotional complexity that made elephants among Earth's most intelligent creatures. Janani's herd included his mate Amara and their adolescent daughter Kessie, whose playful nature and rapid learning had made her a favorite among wildlife researchers studying elephant family dynamics. The family had established themselves in territory rich in seasonal water sources and high-quality grazing, creating a stable base that allowed them to coexist peacefully with the predators who shared their ancient homeland. This unlikely proximity between Africa's apex predator and its largest land mammal would prove crucial to the unbelievable rescue about to unfold.
That golden Friday morning settled peacefully over the Maasai Mara's endless grasslands, with the rising sun painting the savannah in warm hues of amber and bronze as Asha led her 3 cubs on their daily exploration of their territory's eastern boundaries. The lioness moved with the confident grace of a mother completely at ease in familiar terrain, her keen amber eyes constantly scanning the landscape for both opportunities and threats, while her cubs tumbled playfully through the short grass behind her. The morning air carried the crisp coolness that characterized the Mara's dawn hours, filled with the melodic calls of lilac-breasted rollers and the distant lowing of wildebeest herds that had begun their seasonal migration across these ancient plains. A gentle breeze rustled through the scattered acacia trees, creating natural music that had serenaded countless generations of wildlife through their daily routines. Jengo, Bamane, and Little Zuri had settled into their preferred morning activity of mock hunting, practicing stalking techniques on grasshoppers and shadows while their mother maintained watchful supervision from a comfortable distance. Their playful growls and tumbling movements created a soundtrack of pure familial joy that embodied everything beautiful about lion family dynamics in their natural habitat. 5 kilometers away, Janani's elephant family had begun their morning foraging routine with the unhurried rhythm that characterized their peaceful existence in this protected territory. The massive bull positioned himself strategically where he could monitor both his family's safety and the surrounding grassland for any signs of potential threats, while Amara and young Kessie moved methodically through a grove of fever trees, selecting the most nutritious bark and leaves. The soundscape was quintessentially East African, the haunting calls of crowned cranes echoing across the open plains, the distant splash of hippos in the Mara River, and the gentle rustling of grass as countless creatures went about their morning routines in perfect harmony with their ancient environment. It was the kind of perfect morning that represented the timeless rhythm of life in the Mara, a moment of pure tranquility where predator and prey, large and small, existed in the delicate balance that had sustained this ecosystem for millions of years. Neither Asha nor Janani could know that this peaceful scene was about to be shattered by events that would test the very foundations of natural law and evolutionary programming.
Asha's peaceful morning with her cubs was suddenly shattered when the ground beneath her paws began to give way, revealing a hidden danger that had been concealed by the morning's deceptive tranquility. What appeared to be solid grassland was actually the thin crust covering an abandoned warthog burrow that had been enlarged by recent rains into a treacherous pit nearly 8 feet deep, with walls too steep and unstable for escape. The lioness's powerful frame crashed through the false surface with a sickening thud,
her desperate claws finding no purchase on the crumbling earthen walls as she tumbled into the natural trap that had claimed countless unsuspecting animals over the years. Her cubs' playful morning had instantly transformed into a nightmare as they watched their mother disappear into what seemed like the earth itself swallowing her whole.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
From the bottom of the pit, Asha's situation was dire beyond imagination. The narrow confines prevented her from building momentum for jumping, while the unstable walls collapsed further with each attempt to climb, creating an inescapable prism that grew deeper with every desperate effort to reach her cubs. Her powerful hind legs, designed for explosive bursts across open grassland, were useless in the cramped vertical space that negated every natural advantage she possessed as Africa's apex predator. Above ground, Django, Bomani, and Zuri paced frantically around the pit's edge, their confused mewing calls speaking of terror and helplessness as they processed the reality that their protector had vanished into a danger they couldn't understand or combat. At 4 months old, they possessed neither the knowledge nor physical capability to survive alone in the Mara's unforgiving wilderness. The cruel irony of Asha's predicament became increasingly apparent as the morning sun climbed higher, bringing with it the scorching heat that would transform the earthen pit into a furnace by midday. Her situation was deteriorating rapidly, not just from the immediate threat of heat exhaustion, but from the knowledge that her cubs' survival depended entirely on her escape from a trap that seemed designed by nature itself to be inescapable. As Asha's desperate roars echoed across the grassland, calling for help that seemed impossible in this vast wilderness, she had no way of knowing that salvation would come from the most unbelievable source imaginable.
As the morning sun climbed higher over the Maasai Mara, Asha's situation in the earthen pit grew increasingly desperate with each passing minute. The narrow confines that had initially seemed like her primary challenge were revealing themselves to be part of a far more complex and deadly trap that threatened not just her immediate survival, but the lives of her 3 helpless cubs who depended entirely on her protection. The pit's walls, saturated from recent rains, continued to collapse with each of her escape attempts, making the prison deeper and more unstable while covering her golden coat with thick mud that weighed down her movements and sapped her strength. More critically, the confined space was preventing her from regulating her body temperature as the sun's intensity increased, creating conditions that would lead to heat exhaustion within hours. Above ground, her cubs faced threats that multiplied exponentially with each minute their mother remained trapped. At 4 months old, Django, Bomani, and Zuri possessed none of the survival skills necessary to avoid the countless predators that viewed unprotected lion cubs as easy prey. Hyena clans, leopards, and even large birds of prey represented constant dangers that their mother's presence normally deterred. What made the situation even more heartbreaking was the cubs' obvious confusion and growing distress as they processed their mother's disappearance. Their desperate mewing calls were growing weaker and more sporadic, indicating that dehydration and panic were beginning to affect their ability to think clearly or make sound decisions about their immediate safety. The cruel mathematics of the situation became increasingly apparent as time passed. Even if Asha somehow managed to escape the pit, the delay was consuming precious hours during which her cubs needed constant protection and guidance. The longer her absence continued, the more likely it became that they would wander into territories controlled by predators who specialized in eliminating competitor species' offspring. Most devastating was the systematic nature of the trap. The abandoned warthog burrow had been perfectly positioned along natural wildlife corridors, creating an almost inevitable intersection between unsuspecting animals and concealed danger. The morning's deceptive grass covering had transformed a normal territorial patrol into a potentially fatal encounter with one of the savannah's most insidious natural hazards. As Asha's roars for help grew more desperate and her physical strength began to fail, the reality of her situation was becoming undeniable.
Without immediate assistance, both she and her cubs faced certain death. Trapped at the bottom of the earthen pit, Asha found herself confronting an impossible situation that challenged every maternal instinct evolution had programmed into her powerful frame. Her repeated attempts to escape had only worsened her predicament, creating a deeper prison while exhausting the strength she would need for any eventual rescue attempt. The mud-slick walls offered no purchase for her claws, and the narrow confines prevented the running start that might have given her the momentum needed to reach the surface. Above her, the heartbreaking sight of her 3 cubs circling the pit's edge with increasing desperation triggered protective responses that had nowhere to direct their energy. Django, Bomani, and Zuri's confused mewing calls spoke of creatures whose entire world had suddenly become incomprehensible and threatening. Their mother's absence violated every security they had known, leaving them emotionally and practically helpless in an environment filled with mortal dangers. The lioness's tactical mind raced through possibilities that all led to the same devastating conclusion. Conventional escape was impossible without assistance that seemed unlikely to materialize in this remote section of the reserve. Her powerful hind legs, designed for explosive acceleration across open grassland, were useless in the vertical challenge that negated every natural advantage she possessed as Africa's premier predator. What made her situation most torturous was the knowledge that time was working against not just her own survival, but her cubs' ability to survive without protection. Every minute she remained trapped was a minute during which hyenas, leopards, or other threats could discover 3 undefended lion cubs, prey that would represent both easy meals and the elimination of future competition. The heat was becoming increasingly oppressive as the sun climbed toward its midday peak, transforming the earthen pit into a furnace that threatened heat exhaustion long before dehydration or starvation became factors. Asha's golden coat was becoming matted with mud and sweat as her body struggled to regulate temperature in an environment that prevented normal cooling behaviors. Most devastating was the realization that her roars for help were likely futile in this vast wilderness, where the nearest pride territories were kilometers away, and her distress calls might actually attract predators rather than rescuers. Yet maternal desperation drove her to continue calling, hoping against hope that somehow, somewhere, help might hear and respond to her desperate pleas. 5 kilometers away, Janani's acute hearing detected something that made his massive ears swivel with intense concentration, the distant sound of desperate roaring that carried emotional weight far beyond normal territorial calls. The elephant's remarkable auditory capabilities, evolved to detect communications across vast distances, immediately recognized the distress signals as genuine calls for help rather than aggressive territorial displays. What happened next defied every assumption about elephant behavior and species rivalry. Instead of ignoring the calls from a natural competitor, Janani began moving deliberately toward the source of the distress, with his family following behind him in formation that suggested coordinated response to emergency rather than casual foraging movement. His intelligence allowed him to distinguish between different types of vocalizations, and what he was hearing spoke of maternal desperation that transcended species boundaries. Janani's decision to investigate represented a choice that challenged millions of years of evolutionary programming. Lions and elephants typically maintained respectful distances, with each species recognizing the other's capacity for inflicting serious damage in territorial disputes.
Yet, something about the quality of Asha's calls was triggering responses in the massive bull that went beyond normal interspecies awareness. As Janani approached the source of the roaring, his remarkable cognitive abilities began processing a situation that required problem-solving skills that few creatures possessed. The sight of 3 lion cubs circling frantically around what appeared to be a natural pit, combined with the obvious distress calls emanating from below ground, presented a scenario that his intelligence immediately recognized as a rescue situation. The breakthrough moment came when young Kisi, observing the cub's obvious distress, began making the soft, rumbling vocalizations that elephants used for reassurance and communication. Her innocent attempt to comfort the lion cubs seemed to recognize in Jengo, Bomani, and Zuri that these massive creatures represented potential help rather than additional threats. Janani's assessment of the situation was swift and decisive. His 6-ton frame and powerful trunk represented the only force in the immediate area capable of the kind of earth-moving that might be required to create an escape route from the pit. What happened next would challenge every scientific understanding of interspecies cooperation and demonstrate that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge when maternal desperation calls for solutions that transcend natural boundaries. What unfolded next would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of interspecies cooperation ever documented in wildlife research. Janani approached the pit with deliberate caution, his massive trunk extended to assess the structural integrity of the surrounding earth, while his intelligent eyes calculated the engineering challenge that lay before him. The elephant's remarkable problem-solving abilities immediately recognized that simple digging would likely cause further collapse, requiring a more sophisticated approach. Working with the methodical precision that made elephants legendary for their engineering capabilities, Janani began carefully removing earth from the pit's edges in strategic locations that would create a gradually sloping ramp rather than attempting to pull Asha directly upward. His 6-ton frame provided the leverage necessary to move substantial amounts of soil, while his trunk sensitivity allowed him to avoid destabilizing the walls that still confined the desperate lioness. The most remarkable aspect of the rescue was the communication that developed between elephant and lion despite their lack of shared vocalizations. Asha seemed to understand that Janani's methodical approach represented her best chance for escape, and she positioned herself in areas of the pit that facilitated his digging efforts while avoiding sections where her movements might interfere with his work. Young Kessie and Amara contributed to the rescue effort by creating a protective perimeter around the lion cubs, whose fascination with their massive rescuers had replaced their earlier panic with curious observation. The elephant family's gentle behavior toward the vulnerable cubs demonstrated empathy that transcended species boundaries and challenged fundamental assumptions about predator-prey relationships. As Janani's careful excavation progressed, a usable ramp began emerging from what had been an inescapable vertical prison. The elephant's engineering instincts had created a solution that took advantage of the soil's natural characteristics while avoiding the catastrophic collapse that would have resulted from conventional digging approaches. The critical moment arrived when the ramp reached sufficient length and gradient to allow Asha to build momentum for escape. Working with split-second timing that seemed impossible between species that had never coordinated before, Janani positioned himself to provide stability to the earthen ramp, while Asha gathered her remaining strength for what would be her only chance at freedom. The success of their unprecedented cooperation would depend on perfect execution of a rescue plan that challenged every known principle of wildlife behavior and interspecies relationships. What unfolded next would be remembered as one of the most unbelievable rescues ever witnessed in the African wilderness. Asha gathered her remaining strength and charged up Janani's carefully constructed earthen ramp, her powerful muscles propelling her toward freedom with explosive force that spoke of maternal desperation transformed into unstoppable determination. The moment her paws touched solid ground, something extraordinary happened that defied every assumption about natural enemies. Instead of fleeing immediately or displaying territorial aggression, Asha turned toward Janani with unmistakable recognition and what could only be described as profound gratitude. The lioness approached the massive elephant with deliberate caution, lowering her head in a gesture that transcended species boundaries. Janani's response was equally remarkable. The gentle giant extended his trunk toward Asha in what appeared to be acknowledgement of their shared triumph over impossible circumstances. For several moments, Africa's apex predator and its largest land mammal stood together in peaceful recognition of their unprecedented cooperation. The reunion between Asha and her cubs created a scene of pure joy as Django, Bomani, and Zuri rushed to their mother with desperate relief. But the most unbelievable aspect of the encounter was yet to come. Young Kessie approached the lion family with curious gentleness, creating an impossible tableau of elephants and lions coexisting in harmony that challenged every principle of wildlife behavior and left witnesses speechless with amazement at nature's capacity for the truly miraculous.
In the months following Asha's miraculous rescue, wildlife researchers documented an unprecedented relationship between the lion and elephant families that challenged every assumption about natural enemies. The two families began sharing territory peacefully, with their offspring playing together in ways that redefined scientific understanding of interspecies relationships. Janani's rescue of Asha became legendary among Maasai communities, who viewed it as proof that the natural world possessed wisdom far beyond human comprehension. Local guides began telling the story to visitors as evidence that nature's greatest miracles emerge when compassion transcends evolutionary programming. The rescue sparked international research into interspecies empathy and cooperation, with Janani's behavior becoming groundbreaking evidence of elephant emotional intelligence and moral complexity. Scientists realized they had witnessed something that challenged fundamental beliefs about animal consciousness and the capacity for heroism across species boundaries. Today, Asha's cubs thrive alongside Kessie in a territory where lions and elephants have created an impossible alliance that continues to amaze observers. Their story serves as powerful evidence that nature's greatest heroes can emerge from the most unbelievable sources, proving that sometimes salvation comes from places so unexpected they rewrite our understanding of what's possible in the wild. In Kenya's golden grasslands, where ancient enemies became eternal friends, one elephant's compassion created a miracle that will inspire conservation efforts for generations to come.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.